This is the UK Brand Show with Penny Williams and Mark Challoner.
Well, welcome everyone, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to the UK Brand Show. Hello, Penny.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, good. A bit fed up with the rain, but hopefully we're going to have some sunshine this week.
Well, we are coming into winter now.
I don't like this time of year.
No, I don't.
All my school photos when I was little, they were taken in October and November, and I was really pale and spotty and just look horrendous. I think I must suffer with that sad disease.
Yeah, well, maybe so. Well, it is depressing though, isn't it, when you see it from moving in from summer to what was, glorious sunshine and warmth to go with it to, not quite so.
Yeah, we had 6 months, so we've got to be grateful for that, haven't we?
I guess so.
And it's only, what is it? 80, might be 79 days till Christmas.
Well, that's comforting, I'm sure. So
what have we got today?
Today we've got a great guest. And
yeah.
The guy we spoke to, it's quite a while ago now, it's maybe a year or so ago, David Murphy from Mobile Marketing Magazine. And he's really at the forefront of, what's happening in mobile and where it's all going. And I thought I wanted to speak to David because, we've all been through, and still are to some extent, going through a lockdown. But mobile usage has sort of rocketed during that period. We all go to a supermarket now. A lot of them, you've got to pay by, credit card or mobile, payments, and people are using the mobile more so to do so.
Yeah.
So it's changing the way we're doing things. And I think it's in a bizarre sort of way, I would think that COVID has been almost a boom for the mobile industry, because a lot of things that were trying to be put in place, and I've been trying to champion a lot of things on mobile for many years now, and getting things moving is sometimes difficult. But suddenly, something like this awful thing happens and it forces people's hand.
Absolutely. I got a new mobile at the weekend, actually.
Did you?
Yeah, and I've rearranged all my apps so I feel a lot more organised. But
yeah,
it would be good if there were more opportunities to make things all in one place, your payments, and because you start to end up with a lot of platforms and you're buying on different places and different ways. It would be great if everything could be in your mobile.
Yeah. Well, David's going to join us in about 10 minutes, I think. So, and I thought a good way just to set the scene for what, David's going to talk to us about is, how COVID is, how mobile has reacted to COVID and what we think about apps these days and stuff like that. I thought a good way to set the scene really is just to talk about the world that we've operated in for many years in the media industries, and they've long been at the forefront of, trialing mobile media tools to deliver added value services. And, certainly now we've seen a lot of big companies dropping their spend. Global ad revenues are dropping hugely. So they're now taking things like these value-added services much more seriously. And value-added services can be propelled by mobile services, hugely. And I'm thinking particularly, so in the news media sense, and not just them, but particularly for them because we've been involved in it, things like what's called direct carrier billing. So charging direct to your mobile invoice at the end of the month, something which has been trialed for a long, long time, but where you're asking people to buy a subscription to your newspaper, say, it's easier rather than go through the whole process online to say, click here, put your name, address in, put this in, put that in. We've mentioned this before on the show, I know, but why not have it where you just make one click and you're done? And it's easy, it's frictionless, and it's straight through to your mobile phone bill at the end of each month when you pay your subscription.
Sort of developing that whole Apple Pay thing, isn't it? I've got a few subscriptions on Apple Pay. So like I said earlier, it's about having everything in one place would be an awful lot easier.
Yeah. But I think where media's got to, and I guess it applies to many brands as well and many industries, is what is value add for your existing customers? If you're, for example, a subscriber already, do I give you more? Or is the value add a service which is, to deliver new readers or new listeners and new viewers to your new customers, to your publication or your website or whatever it might be. So they both require different approaches, but the key is that they are adding value. So
Well, with added value, does that mean also potentially getting more revenue from one client. So you're
Yeah,
adding value by another service, but actually you're still charging them slightly more, maybe.
well, not it could be, but I think more in terms of, so if you've got a very loyal customers loyal to your brand, they're more likely to spend more with you on things which you're promoting or you're involved with, you're engaged in, because they trust you. As long as you don't abuse that trust, of course. But news media, for example, has been long established with offering things like reader holidays or holiday deals or products tailored to the readership. You know, buy these particular items because, you know, we think they're really good, or whatever. Now, in most of those cases, in a publisher's case, for example, they will take a cut of that, but there will be a team behind it who are working out, well, there's no point in using up your space in a newspaper, say, if no one's going to buy it, because it's valuable space. So it has to be worth its weight in people's responses and engagement. And then, of course, you've got all the things like data and AI and how you can use that data going forward. If you do it well under GDPR, of course, if you use it well, how you create a smart database on the back of it. But it's understanding what people want. And I think, you know, it's becoming increasingly mobile as time has gone on. And I think COVID, and we'll talk to David about this, COVID has sort of accelerated that to some extent.
Yeah, COVID has accelerated a lot of things, hasn't it? In terms of, you know, businesses looking at new opportunities and changing what they're doing, but also some people being sort of challenged, really, that unless they're online, you're struggling. You know, people in lockdown have, as you say, used their mobiles, but done so much more online.
Yeah, it's right. It's right. I mean, things like, it's not just about money as well as things like podcasting and downloadable content. They're increasingly popular for mobile. So, you know, you can turn that maybe into a free or a freemium news content that you charge for, but particularly good for mobile, I thought.
Yeah.
So, we may have. Do we have David on the line?
Indeed, you do, Mark. Good
There
morning.
we are. Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, I love your view from your penthouse.
Yeah, I was trying to replicate yours. Unfortunately, mine's only virtual.
Well, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us again, because it's been a while since we spoke to you.
Absolutely, yeah, no, pleasure to be here.
So Penny and I were just talking about, you know, what we see to be a rise in mobile generally, and how media, for example, are just taking on board value-added services these days. I mean, it's becoming more and more mobile, it seems, as we've gone on. But
yeah, absolutely. I think
that from a general point of view.
Absolutely, I think you know, people are just doing more stuff on mobile these days. You know, and COVID has played probably a large part in that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at payments, you know, there's probably a lot of people out there wouldn't have dreamt of paying for things on their mobile phone a few months ago, and they've sort of been forced into it.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, mobile payments have been growing pretty dramatically anyway. I saw some figures just before lockdown in February. A company called Merchant Savvy forecasting that there'd be more than 1 billion people, 1.3 billion people using mobile payments in a couple of years' time, 2023, and that the size of the mobile payment market will grow to just over $3 billion by 2024, and that's up from just 1.1 billion last year. And I guess you only have to look at some of the companies in the space, you know, the likes of Apple, Google, Amazon, Samsung, WeChat, you know, some big hitters in there.
Yeah.
So when you say mobile payments, is that through your your platform, your provider, or is that the sort of contactless as well, or both?
Yeah, both. That's my understanding. That's how I read it. Obviously, different people have different definitions, but I'm pretty sure that report it was any form of payment on mobile.
Right.
I think if you look at things like, you know, just think of the number of shops you go into now and bars and restaurants where cash is not an option. You know, it was identified very early on as a you know, very easy and sort of very virulent, if I can say it, way for the virus to spread. Obviously, if that's not a I'm saying the same thing twice, but so they've just stopped taking cash. So you know, and not just the payment side of things, but people have gone into pubs and restaurants and found that they can't just sort of go to the bar and order a drink. They have to download an app to do it, and it's just forced more people down that line. And I think the sort of fear factor, the nervousness that some people might have had about loading up a credit card on their mobile phone for the first time, or just adding some sort of payment facility. You do it a couple of times and you soon get used to it. So I think it has been a big boost to mobile payments, the whole COVID thing. Obviously it's not been a boost to many other things, but that's one thing to note out of it. I think the other point to note as well, I don't know if you've noticed this, when you go in, your local greengrocers, little independent shops that never would have taken credit cards maybe a year ago. There's now some very sort of smart systems out there. I remember we used to have a credit card machine for taking payments for people to come to our events, and there was a big deposit to pay on it. The commissions were quite hefty, and you had to jump through all sorts of hoops to prove that you were creditworthy. Now you've got the likes of things like Square and iZettle. They've just made it very easy for small businesses to take credit card payments and contactless mobile payments.
And you can feed them through your mobile phone as well.
Absolutely. And then I don't know if this has come up in conversation on any of your previous shows, but there's a thing called RCS, which is a bit like a supercharged text message, or some people call it a message in an app, and it's a way for brands to engage with people.
With communication services, David, yeah.
Yeah. So a company called Mgage just a few weeks ago, they launched mobile payments within RCS, which is quite a notable thing. RCS itself is still very sort of small beer, if I can put it that way. But as it gains momentum, then the fact that you can, as a brand, invite somebody to pay for whatever good or service you're trying to sell them through the RCS engagement is potentially quite a big thing.
Yeah. Well, listen, before we move on, just one thing I'm conscious we just didn't do, because it's such a great subject that we could talk for hours on it, I'm sure, which we won't do for anyone listening in. But just tell us a little bit about yourself and Mobile Marketing Magazine for those who don't know you.
Yeah, for sure. So I spent about, I don't know, too long really, freelancing for various marketing trade titles 25 years ago. And it got to 15 years ago, 2005, and mobile seemed to be becoming a thing. It started becoming a thing in about 2002. And there was a thing around called WAP, which was Wireless Application Protocol, like an early version of the mobile web. And it wasn't very good. So a few brands, tried it and got their sort of fingers burnt and then sort of dipped out again. But about 2005, it started to become a thing. And I thought, well, I'm sitting at home every day writing, why not start a little blog off about this whole mobile marketing thing? And it wasn't really a world according to me sort of blog. It was just like a good old fashioned trade magazine where we could gather together a load of news about, who was doing what in this emerging space. And I'm, delighted to say that 15 years later, we're still doing that. And obviously we've added events to the core publishing arm, because that's what you tend to do, and awards programs and things like that. But it's great to be able to just spend all day, every day, sort of covering mobile and the wider digital marketing space.
It's amazing, 15 years. I sort of remember back then as well. It's like, God, am I that old? Yes, I am.
Well, I know. I think you're one of the few people I speak to who's been doing mobile longer than I have. I mean, I haven't actually been doing it. I've just been writing about it. But yeah, a lot of admiration for those people who got in early and saw the potential and where it might go, because it's gone there and far beyond that.
Well, you say that, but yeah, we've had some success with mobile and getting the message out and the rest of it for a number of years now. But still, it's been a frustration just getting people to push the button and say, yes, we're going to do something with mobile, or not just add it on as an extra to what we're doing, to other things, but take it seriously as its own channel. And that's been the biggest thing I think that's possibly happened with COVID now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a couple of things. I'll go into this in a while in terms of this whole idea of what does premium mean. If you look at the old world, and I know you're very familiar with that through your Inmar days and transitioning that, the newspaper publishers onto digital, but premium used to be the FT or Vogue or Cosmopolitan. On mobile, a premium environment to advertising could be a mobile game, and this is what a lot of brands haven't got their head around yet. But as you were saying, I think more people are starting to get mobile now. I think COVID's definitely played a part. I've heard businesses talking about having gone through 5 years of digital transformation in 5 months. And in a similar way, once you get used to doing your mobile for things like paying for stuff and ordering stuff, as I was saying earlier, there's no going back.
So yeah, we are. Yeah, so you think it's the point of no return finally for mobile? You know, people get it now, and so particularly for payments.
Yeah, and you've only got to look at the the younger generation coming through who live their life on mobile. My youngest daughter, who's not that young, she's 19. I think she only uses a laptop because she has to. She's at university now, and when she was doing her A levels, but anything else, whether she's looking up a recipe, whether she's talking with friends, it's all on the mobile phone.
Mm. So just get on to just paying for things on mobile, and one thing which we've sort of seen to be, and what seems to be rising dramatically, is the whole area of mobile ticketing. Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think it has been rising. I don't have many stats. I did see one the other day, a company called Core3. I'm sorry, I'm trouble my THs. And they found that on the first normal working day of 2019, there were 140,000 mobile tickets issued for bus and train services, which was 23 times the figure for the same day a few years earlier. So it is definitely rising. So in terms of transportation, yes. In terms of mobile ticketing for things like gigs and museum visits and stuff, there's not really much of that been going on lately. But I think when things do get back to normal, as as we hope they will sooner rather than later, then it will find its place again. Always remember a story a few years ago, a guy from Chiltern Trains, and they were the first companies to do mobile tickets. And somebody asked him a question. He said, "It's all very, very good, this mobile ticketing thing, but what if I'm on the train on the way home and my phone dies and, the inspector, the conductor, whatever, comes around and asks to see the ticket?" And he said, "It's a bit like with a paper ticket, really, and somebody hasn't got their paper ticket. We'd look you up and down. If we liked the cut of your jib, we'd say, no worries, and if we didn't, you get fined."
It's funny.
Things don't change.
Well, it's funny. Well, as you know, and Penny knows, I do a lot of live music, which of course has just fallen off a cliff recently. But but I've noticed in that space, doing a gig a week or something, that you're getting a lot of tickets now, which are just mobile accessed. But what's bizarre to me is when you turn up at the venue, they'll look at your ticket and sort of look at the detail and let you in. So not everyone's wired up, if you like, or technologied up to be able to scan your barcode when you arrive and access you there, but they just check that you've got the details.
Yeah, no, Mark, I know you didn't want to talk football, but you got your own story about tickets and not having them on mobile, haven't you?
That's exactly right. Yes, I at the Champions League final in Madrid last year. I was pickpocketed my paper ticket, and I didn't get into the stadium to see my beloved team win the Champions League because no one wanted to know. And if they had it on mobile, which was the point, David, you're right, they could have traced me. Yeah, and they did it for the Europa League final apparently, but not the Champions League final. So it's obviously the industry's moving that way, but it's not fast enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I've got another story as recent as today. So I've applied. Now you can apply to be on various TV shows, me in the audience and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would never really do that apart from one particular show which I love, which is Have I Got News for You? In the background, they expect it. So they've sent me mobile ticketing for that on email. And I don't know if you can explain this, but I've not seen this before. So they sent me my ticket on email with a barcode on it. We're saying, when you arrive at the studios, scan your barcode, blah, blah, blah. I came out of it, went back in to print. I thought I'll print the ticket off. I'm still at that point where sometimes you think I still need to print the ticket off as well. I'm just in case. So I printed this off, and there's no barcode when I print it off. So go back into the email. There's no barcode there suddenly. So I yesterday get an email from the company to say, just checking you got your ticket for the Have I Got News for You show. So I wrote back and said, well, I've had the notification, but I don't seem to have got the mobile barcode. And I thought, maybe I've made it up. Did I not have one? So they wrote back straight away and said, yeah, here it is. Sorry about that. Here it is. And there was a barcode on it. This morning I've got into it to print it off again. There's no barcode there. It's not there again.
This has nothing to do with your little sideline of magic, is it, Mark? You're not making the barcode disappear.
It's a good idea, though. But no, it's not. So I'm wondering, I just wrote to them this morning, have I detected a flaw in your system? Is it the fact that once I've opened the thing with the barcode on, it doesn't appear again? I don't know how that's possible, but...
Well, it must be a Snapchat barcode or whatever, disappears after first open.
Yeah, it must be something like that, mustn't it? Because I then thought, why did they write to me just to check I've got the barcode? Why wouldn't I not have had it?
See, I always take a photo. I'd take a screenshot.
Does that always work, David, if you take a screenshot?
Oh, it does for me. It sounds like it does for Penny. Yeah.
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 I guess
Take a screenshot, and then it doesn't matter if you haven't got signal or whatever, you've always got it, the barcode on your phone.
As I've noticed on the Thames Clipper, I get the boat outside here to go into town, and I get on the Thames Clipper boat, now called the Uber boat. And when you go on, you can buy a ticket by your app, by the Thames Clipper app, and it sends you a barcode. But it's a live barcode, because if I took a screen grab of it, they wouldn't let me on. What they do is the barcode, directly under the barcode is a live moving bar, which has the date on and the time. And unless that's moving bar underneath it, you can't use it as a screen grab, which is interesting.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think QR codes, funnily enough, have seen a bit of a resurgence during, this last few months with what we were talking about, people having to download apps and trying to make it easier for them. I've noticed a few other things as well that have actually done quite well out of the pandemic. Would be worth spending a few minutes talking about those.
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Well, there have been, obviously, it's been bad for business in general, but one of the things that's really boomed over the last few months has been mobile games. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, you've had the companies that publish these games and the ad networks that they work with trying to sell ads within them, desperately reaching out to publishers over the last few years saying, there's a new premium in mobile, and it's not necessarily the FT. Games are a good place to advertise. And they've struggled, if I'm honest, because the average conception of a mobile gamer is a bit of a sad case who's in his bedroom all day, doesn't have a lot of disposable income, doesn't have a lot of interest in life, and just plays video games. And their argument is that that's actually wrong, that with the growth of casual games on mobile, as opposed to, expensive games consoles, there are games out there, there's a game genre for everyone. And I certainly see my wife playing word games and, puzzle games and stuff like that. I'm not sure she's ever clicked on one of the ads, if I'm totally honest, but, their argument is that the average mobile gamer is nothing like what people think, that they actually skew more female than male, that they're about 39 years of age, typically highly educated, affluent. Often they say they're the head of the household that they live in and responsible for purchasing decisions. And then on top of that, what every brand who's going to advertise is going to want is scale. And they reckon, the company I spoke to, which was a company called Ad Colony, they referenced a report from Verizon, the US mobile network, said that mobile gaming was up by 75% in the first couple of months of lockdown. More than 2.3 billion mobile games downloaded between March 5th and April 5th alone. That was 60% up year on year. And it was the only form of entertainment to see a bigger increase in video streaming. So they're sort of pretty impressive stats. Another company called App Annie that sort of tracks all this, they think that 20 billion mobile games have been downloaded worldwide this year. And a final stat from a company called Newzoo, that there'll be 2.69 billion gamers by the end of the year, and just over 3 billion by 2023. And the vast majority will be playing on mobile devices. One final thing on games, or two final things. The companies that push in-game ads, they argue that the ad units in mobile games are much less interruptive than in lots of other channels. They quite often come as some sort of value exchange where, in return for looking at a brand's ad, you'll get a life, or you'll get to complete a level that you've been struggling with. And I must admit, I was very cynical. I spoke to one of these companies a few years ago and said, well, that's just bribery, isn't it? And the way he expressed it, he said, no, it's a really honest value exchange. Look at the ad, get a life, and, get a life. No pun intended. But I do take his point, that it's a very sort of honest exchange. If you're prepared to just be exposed to this ad for 10 seconds, whatever it is, then you can get past this level that you've been struggling with.
Doesn't that depend how annoying those ads are and how often they appear and how they intrude on your experience?
Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, you'll probably be aware over the past few years, there's been various schemes offering people money to look at ads on their phone, and when you look at it, they'd have to look at like 900 ads to earn a tenner in a month. And you think, well, if anyone is that desperate for the £10, and I know lots of people are, and I don't mean that to come out the wrong way, I really feel for people that have struggled during the pandemic, but it was all those things. I think we're always doomed to fail because they're not an audience that brands are chasing in the first place, so but one last point on games I wanted to mention. A couple of months ago in the US, the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, they actually approved the first ever prescription for a video game called Endeavour RX, which apparently improves attention function in children with ADHD. So, maybe these guys have got a point. Maybe there is something in mobile games.
Yeah, I guess it's as long as it's not as addictive as some people imagine it to be, where you just can't leave it alone. I saw a thing. I think Penny and I were talking about this last week. Have you seen something on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which is a sort of Netflix original documentary? And they were talking about...
I've had it flagged to me. I haven't got around to watching it yet.
Watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, you should watch it, Pen. Yeah. And Ed, what do you think of it?
I think it's all quite obvious, but actually to hear the developers say the things that they were saying, I've turned off all my notifications, because I had noticed that it was starting to drive me a bit nuts, because I'm on a lot of platforms, and actually it's coming at you all the time, and you can choose to put it down, but it's much easier if there's nothing on that screen that's saying you've got these updates or you get the notifications. But yeah, I felt that there was some very strong words in terms of how it's manipulating behaviours, and whilst it was set up for good, there is a lot of concerns around it, and that's what they're campaigning for, is some legislation, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's been a bit of sort of, whether you call it lip service or a genuine effort on the likes of some of the social networks to remind people that, to keep track of how much time they're spending on that platform, and to have a rest from it for a bit. I read a book a few years ago. It sounds like this guy may well feature in this Netflix thing. I can't remember his name, but it was Spanish, and the book is called Chaos Monkeys. And it was supposedly about the VC sort of world in on the West Coast. But actually this guy was with Facebook for the early years of it, and it turned into a bit of a not very flattering biography of Facebook and how it got to where it is today. It's really interesting. I think it was that book where he said, if you wonder why they're trying to bring the internet to parts of the world that hasn't got it, it's because they're running out of new users in the developed world, so they've got to find them somewhere else.
Well, the reason why I mentioned it, David, based on what you've just said, and this addiction thing with young people and stuff, and this particular thing, the social dilemma, it fictitiously parallels what experts from the industry have said, who have left the likes of Apple and Google and that because they don't like the practices. And one of them shows this young lad, this teenager, who can't leave his phone alone because he's been asked to by his parents for a monetary incentive by doing so. And they were sort of showing you how Facebook are saying, well, actually, if you don't pay for the product, then you are the product.
Yeah.
You are being manipulated to suit them, and basically saying that they showed this lad who hadn't responded to his phone for about 2 or 3 days, and Facebook, fictitiously in the background saying, he hasn't responded for a while. What can we do? And he's sending this notification out to his phone, which says, did you know your ex-girlfriend's now in a new relationship? Which, of course, he has to log on. It's too much for him now. He's got to log on this time and see it. And he reacts to it, and over the course of a few weeks, and becomes depressed about the whole thing. And Facebook's just sending products around depression and putting them to link into groups.
Yeah, and what's surprising, I think, is that we're all probably, well, I know you are, Mark. Penny, I know less about your background, so I don't know if you are. I don't think if I watched that documentary, much of it would come as a shock to me, because I spent 15 years writing about that stuff. But the friend who flagged it to me is a very sort of smart guy. He's spent all his life selling sports rights, mainly for cricket, to broadcasters all over the world, very well travelled, knows what he's talking about. And he was absolutely shocked. He just didn't know any of this stuff was happening behind the scenes.
I think for me, the dangerous part is a couple of words they use, like it's surveillance capitalism and algorithms are increasing polarization. That was quite important for me, because I've seen some very strange behaviors from people during lockdown, and that would then make a lot more sense. That if you buy into the conspiracy theory of COVID-19, etc., and they are producing more of that information to you, you get more and more brainwashed. And I think that's the scary bit of it. Although, like you say, I've been around it for years and I get it, but actually to see it in the programme and the way they've presented it, it was great food for thought.
Yeah, and the polarization thing's interesting. I'm sure somebody could or has written a book on this, but even if you take Facebook out of the equation and you just let the users on the platform do their stuff, you're attracted to people of a similar opinion to yourself, aren't you? So you imagine that the whole world thinks like you do, you know, that you know, Labour's great and the Conservatives are terrible, or the opposite. And yeah, that polarization thing is a big deal, because then you can't understand why your side doesn't win the election, because you thought everyone was for you.
Mm.
So just talking about the scary bit, David, I mean, and it's not necessarily scary, but it could be to some people, location-based mobile technology. And I was seeing a lot of that now. It recognizes where I am and can send me an offer based on where I am. I mean, surely that's going to be huge in the future. Have you seen any people who are doing it really well?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two ways of doing location. There's a one that basically, as long as you've given permission for it to happen, your phone is tracked. So effectively, you are tracked. So wherever you go, you know, somebody knows about it. So for you, Mark, it might be the fact that prior to lockdown, you're at Anfield every 2 weeks watching football, so they can identify you as a Liverpool football fan, and they're clever enough to know that if you go to a car showroom for, you know, every day for for 6 months, you probably work there. But if you go every weekend for 4 weeks and it's to Ford and to Seat, then you're probably in the market for one of those cars. And it's interesting. Seat are a company that I've seen a couple of good campaigns from them recently, entered into our awards. They did working with an agency called S4M, and this is their sort of speciality or location stuff. And they had a couple of campaigns, one with Seat and one with Nando's, and effectively the same sort of thing, targeting people with an ad when they're within a certain distance of the restaurant or the car dealership. And when they click on the ad that they see, they're shown walking or driving directions to the outlet. And, you know, these types of promotions tend to work pretty well, because there's some good data behind them, and some good science behind them, and some good tech behind them. If you look at Waze, you know, the navigation app owned by Google, they do a thing called sponsored pins. So it could be that you're a brand looking to drive Wave users into certain retailers to buy some of your product. And they did such a campaign actually with Coca-Cola in the run up to Christmas last year. And in addition to driving footfall into the two retailers, I think it was Morrison's and could have been Aldi the other, but I could be wrong. They also put a what they call the zero speed takeover, and what that is, obviously advertising to people's phones while they're driving, is a bit of a dodgy area potentially. So this zero speed takeover is where the app detects that the car's not moving, and it then puts an ad on the screen. And in this case, it was to invite the user to click on this thing to change the voice that's reading the Waze directions out to Santa Claus. Huh. You think, well, that's no big deal really, but it went down really well on social media. Most of the stuff that I saw around it on social media, people didn't really notice that it was a sponsored thing. They just thought Waze had, you know, given them the option to switch to the Santa voice, and 54,000 people did it. So, you know, pretty successful campaign. The only issue, I think, is that people are obviously getting more attuned to what's being done in the background on their phones. And you'll often see now when you fire an app up, certainly on iPhones, and I suspect it's similar on Android, a little message just saying, look, this app's been using your location in the background. Do you want to allow it to continue? And the options will be yes, but just while using the app, or yes, always, or no. So once people start, you know, realizing that they can switch this stuff off, and the more people do switch it off, then, you know, the brands, the advertisers are going to potentially lose the scale that they all want as well.
But isn't that just down to what we all talk about sometimes, the user experience? If I'm getting a really good user experience out of it, I won't care whether in fact you know where I am, because you give me something which is relevant to where I am. I'm outside Greg's. I can go to the Free Sausage Roll with this right now.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think maybe, you know, the younger generation coming through who are more digital savvy will accept that value exchange. You know, I've seen ads saying you can switch cookies off this on web, mainly on websites, but you know, you will see more generic advertising. We won't be able to target it to yourself.
I've seen that.
So I guess then the challenge for the advertisers is to live up to that promise, you know, to actually, someone that opts into it, to actually serve them ads for things they want to see. And I know one thing we'll all be familiar with is retargeting. You know, the web is has changed a lot these days. And I know you're a Liverpool fan. My team, Burnley, is because I'm from Burnley. Why else would you support them, especially this season? And if I go on to the Burnley Express to see what the latest team news is, I'm being targeted with ads for programmatic virtual conferences in Istanbul, and like no one else in Burnley is going to see that ad. So that's fine, but the retargeting aspect comes in when someone's dropped a cookie on your laptop, and you've been looking at table tennis table. It happened to me a few years ago. I eventually bought one from Decathlon, and I had Amazon chasing me for the next 3 months trying to sell me a table tennis table. It's got to be done more intelligently, and with more relevance to the user.
Yeah, it's right. And not just things like, you bought a green cardigan recently, here's 10 other things that are green.
Yeah. Very sophisticated.
Yeah. Do you know what? But it can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be sophisticated. I remember you were talking about SEAT. I remember a few years ago seeing people say that the north-south divide. So as a northerner, and as a northerner yourself living in the south, you see this sometimes regarding the weather particularly. It is a couple of degrees warmer down south, I do believe.
Yeah,
I feel like a southern softie when I go back up north now because I feel cold. But the point I'm making is that I remember there was an ad, I forget which company, I think it could have been one of your awards actually. Somebody won an award for a very simple thing, but it was effective for Ford, I think it was. And what they said, if your mobile was in the north, then they served you an ad for a cabriolet.
Okay.
Sorry, not a cabriolet, I beg your pardon, for, not a cabriolet, it's the other way around. If you lived in the south, you got one for a cabriolet because you're more likely to take the top down off the car and drive around the sunshine. But if you're in the north, and I don't know where they drew the power, like where the line, but in the north, instead, you were served an ad for the similar car,
for
not
a
cabriolet. No, but it was more about it's really great handling in the wet.
Yeah. No, it's good. I don't think that was one of ours because that does sound, quite clever, quite simple. And I think the challenge is when you're trying to personalize stuff is how far you can realistically take it because, you've got to break it down a little bit more generically like that to start with. I mean, get people to raise their hand and show their interest in a certain type of car. Yeah.
It's interesting. So let's talk about mobile messaging for a minute. There's presumably been a massive explosion during COVID about messaging. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, just before we get on to messaging, let's just talk about, this sort of thing. We're on a Zoom call right now, and I'm sure, before the pandemic, most people had never heard of Zoom. And all of a sudden it became a lifeline to, people who could no longer meet friends and family in the flesh. So last December, let me just throw some figures at you if I can see them. Last December, Zoom said it was hosting 10 million Zoom meeting participants every day. By April, that figure had risen to, wait for it, 300 million. So 30 times increase in 4 months. And those figures were reflected in the UK, where the number of Zoom users, so it's a slightly different metric, but number of Zoom users grew from just over 650,000 in January to 13 million in April.
Wow.
And as you'd expect, people's time online has increased during lockdown. Ofcom do a thing called the Online Nation Report every year. It's released in June, and they find that UK adults spent a daily average of 4 hours and 2 minutes online in the last report, and that was up from just 3.5 hours in September last year. So video calling, and obviously there's other platforms, Teams, and what was the other one? House Party. Facebook's introduced their own version of it. So I suspect all of those could post, maybe not quite to Zoom levels, because they really sort of caught the wave, and they've done very well out of it. But I think they'll all post sort of big increases. But in terms of messaging, Kantar, which is a research firm, they put some numbers out quite early in lockdown, showing that WhatsApp usage increased by 40% in the first week and a half of lockdown. And it was a similar story for other apps like, Messenger and WeChat in China. So I guess it's obvious, really. If we can't see each other as much, then we're gonna mess each other. We're gonna video call each other.
Wait, I know, Penny, I've noticed you and I speak a lot more now, on WhatsApp.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big WhatsApp user, and I suppose I was pre-pandemic. I'm in a lot of different groups, both socially and work-related. I think you're right. Once we lock down, my sort of main day job it was a great way to have a daily management call, because everyone was feeling a bit sort of, oh my God, you know, how are we going to do this? And then various WhatsApp groups developed out of that. But so I'd say I've definitely used the platforms more for work.
David, what about a subject which Penny and I have talked about many times on this show, about things like augmented reality, virtual reality? I mean, we've talked to them, seems like, forever, and we've seen some great examples of it. And I'm just wondering, where do you think they've been touted for many years now as being the next big thing in mobile? I mean, again, do you see that happening?
I think that it's easy to group the two together, and I think we grouped the two together in my most recent awards, but I think they are on different trajectories. I think the fact that with virtual reality, if we come to that first, you know, you need a headset, and they've dropped in price. I think we don't look at the hardware a lot, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think they're maybe just a few £100s now for, you know, an Oculus, which is
that's right,
the company that Facebook bought.
But you still need to buy one. Yeah.
You still need to buy one, and then there's the issue of what content there is available, and the fact that you know, you're then in this virtual world. And I think for some people it's fine. For some people it can get a bit sort of nauseous if you spend too long wearing one of these things. I certainly went to one exhibition where I was invited to put this headset on, and normally if you're at a show and there's a virtual reality demo, you can't get in for love nor money, you know, and there was no one queuing.
I've seen one good example of virtual reality which doesn't require a headset. Which is a virtual tour of households if you're looking to buy a house.
Yeah.
Estate agents are offering that, where you can actually walk yourself through the house.
All right. Okay. Very good.
Really clever.
The thing that I experienced.
You know them.
What they call, sorry?
Matterport.
All right. Okay.
I've been out to their head office in Silicon Valley. A really good company. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. But this demo was just a plank on the floor, and I thought, well, this is interesting. And I got on the plank, put the headset on, and I went up in a lift, and I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to be flying. No, when I got to the top of the lift, the plank was just sticking out over the edge of the building, and I was supposed to walk to the end of it, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't get 2 feet on, and apparently the majority of people that tried that demo that day were the same, and it's quite a famous, it's a take on quite a famous thing to show the power of it. And I almost was sick. I had to sit down and have some water. Really, really odd. But I mean, that's extreme. If we look at virtual reality, I don't think it's mainstream yet, but certainly just through the stuff that's coming through to the website, to Mobile Marketing Magazine, then there are more examples coming through. I look back to 2017 when IKEA launched its IKEA Place app, where you could scan, I don't know if it's hundreds or thousands, but lots of photos from their catalogue and virtually place them in the room that you were thinking of putting them in, and it would show you what they'd look like, both from a colour point of view and from a, you know, the actual to scale. So would this armchair fit nicely in my living room? In the last few months, been a few examples. Chocolate brand Kinder, they launched an app last month called a Play-Doh that brings their toys to life on people's phones. Kellogg's did a campaign in the Middle East for for Cocoa Pops, in which people could scan the packaging with their phone's camera to be taken into a virtual jungle with Coco the monkey and learn about chocolate in the natural world. Obviously, Snapchat have done a lot to bring this a bit more mainstream with their AR lenses. Quite a few brands have been running these. Gucci ran a lens campaign that enabled customers to try on their shoes in AR. Dubai Tourism had a campaign to remind people of all the great sort of things to do in Dubai when the world opens up again. And 7-Eleven, they use AR in their app in Denmark with all sorts of AR games and competitions that they run in partnership with the suppliers. So you go in the store and you're invited to, point your phone at some packaging and get involved in a game. And one thing I've noticed in looking at campaigns like this in our awards is that you say you had 3 or 4 companies vying for the award, you'd normally rule out 1 or 2 on the quality of the experience, and that's not the case anymore. There's some very powerful tech behind it all, and some of these things look absolutely good, absolutely brilliant. The one thing I did want to say though was I think there've been quite a few other AR campaigns that wouldn't have happened were it not for COVID and lockdown. So people realizing that they can't do a physical launch, so they do a virtual one. So there's a phone maker called OnePlus who launched their most recent handset entirely in AR. They had a 360-degree AR stage, video content, animations, and and a digital avatar of their founder, a guy called Carl Pye, showing off a 3D model of the phone. Chelsea, the football club, they launched their new kit with a virtual try-on with augmented reality, where you message the words virtual kit to a mobile number via WhatsApp, and then you could see what the shirt looked like on you. I mean, I've got more. Do you want me to keep going, or have you heard enough?
No, but I think what it does highlight is that that's getting a lot more traction than the VR space, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a simpler proposition. With web AR, you don't even need to download an app. A company like Blipper is behind some of these campaigns, and in the olden days, you would have needed the Blipper app or whichever brand's app you were trying to use the AR with. But with these web AR campaigns now, the experience happens through a browser, so you don't even need to download a dedicated app for it.
I'm conscious we're sucking you dry like a sponge here, David, but we are getting to the end. But I just wanted to, you talk about apps there, just give a quick talk about apps. I mean, what about apps, isn't it? I seem to think, I don't know about you, Pen, but there seems to be a lot of contradiction around that people, say that people are using few apps even though they've got many on their phones. And, Penny's just been talking about putting her apps into folders now and making more. And we have lots of apps, but do we use them? And there's many being developed. There's lots. Will we still be using apps, you think, going forward?
Well, you're right in terms of the difficulty of getting your app sort of used once it's downloaded. People's appetite for a good app has not diminished in any way. But the issue for brands is there's so many out there. It's very hard to get your app first found and then downloaded. And there's obviously a whole industry around this, and some very clever companies doing some very clever stuff. But if you think back to 2008, when the App Store launched, there was something like 500 apps to choose from. By the first quarter of last year, that had risen to 2.2 million in Apple's App Store and another 2.6 in Google Play. Obviously, a lot of duplicates in there, but there's been talk at various times, as you say, over the past couple of years of, app fatigue. Apps have had their day. But when you look at the numbers, it doesn't look that way. So again, company I mentioned earlier, App Annie, they counted 194 billion app downloads in 2018. That was up from 178 billion the previous year. And another company, Statista, estimates to be 258 billion by 2022. Wow. Now, obviously, with all these apps to choose from, people are spending a lot of time on them. So IAB and Comscore, they reckon that 7 out of every 10 digital minutes is spent on mobile. And 9 out of every 10 mobile minutes are spent in an app. So, very little going on in the browser, and that's been quite a rapid shift over the past 5 years, I'd say. Popular categories, as I mentioned earlier, games, although not quite as popular as social and music, they're the two big ones. In fact, 25% of apps in the Apple App Store are games apps. Now, a lot of these apps are free, funded by ads or by revenue from the service they provide. And we talked about Google, Facebook earlier. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product. So that applies to them. Or it could be, a transactional e-commerce app like an Uber or Tesco shopping app. But a lot of money is made from in-app purchases. So again, App Annie estimates that global consumer spend on paid apps and in-app purchases is going to hit $105 billion this year. And I don't know, for anyone who's not familiar with what an in-app purchase looks like, it could be like a special power or a skill in a game, or it could just be, buying something that helps you, like on some social network. You might have an avatar that you can dress up or whatever. But I'll give you a personal example. Over the past few months, I've been trying to learn a bit of Spanish using an app called Duolingo, which highly recommend it if anyone wants to just dip their toes in.
Okay.
Duolingo, yeah. There's other ones out there, and I've played around with a few before I settled on it, and it was the one that I like best. But they've gamified it. So when you're doing a lesson, every time you make a mistake, you lose a life, so to speak. And once you've lost so many, you have to wait until you've got some energy back, which effectively means the next day to carry on. And it kept prompting me to upgrade and pay £6-7 a month for unlimited lives. And I kept dismissing it. And then one day I thought, you know what? I've actually been doing this for like a couple of months on the trot now. Every day they have a thing called a streak. So they're trying to encourage you to keep your streak going. So I'm on about 128 days now, so I can say my name in Spanish. It's fantastic. And it just got frustrating. So I was actually happy to pay that fee for the reassurance of being able to fire that app up, for 5 hours a day at the weekend if I want to. I don't use it that much, to be honest, but so this is a way they get you in on the promise of it's free, and then get you hooked on whatever it is. And I don't think learning the language is a bad thing to be hooked on. I'd say argue it's better than playing a game. And then they get money out of you. And I don't feel bad at all about the way that it's the way that I've been upsold to that. And just one last thing worth noting while we're talking about apps is something called the Super App. So if you look to the East in China and Southeast Asia, you have apps like WeChat. And, they started out as messaging apps, but they can now be used for, paying utility bills, online shopping, calling a cab, booking doctor's appointments, and a lot more. So as a competition to get your app on the consumer's home screen, intensifies, I guess the more utility a brand can add to its app, the more chance it has of being constantly open. There's shocking stats about, if you look after 7 days and after 30 days, the churn for the average app, most people have gone. They've used it once or twice and then never again, because it either hasn't given them enough value, or people get bombarded with too many requests when they first open it up. So you open an app up for the first time, and without giving you any reason to do so, it says, we share your location. Can we send you alerts? Can we send you push notifications? Now, if the brand takes the trouble, and the company's very good at this, Braze is one that springs to mind, to say, why do you want their location? Why do you want to send them push notifications? Tell them, be honest with them, be transparent. Tell them it's so that you can send them offers, and possibly they can get something for less money than would have got before, and then your opt-in rates will go through the roof.
Yeah. So and I guess as particularly in gaming, but particularly in gaming, now you've talked about it, is that a big part of the rise in the likes of gaming and the like will be 5G, and we keep hearing all about 5G, but where the hell are we with it? It's being rolled out slowly, it seems, but what's it all about?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people possibly be confused, and I'm one of them, about all this talk about Huawei not being allowed to get involved in the UK's 5G network. Well, the networks have been building these networks for the last few years, so it just seemed a bit, they're talking as if nothing has been done yet, but obviously they are some way down the line. If I just look, excuse me consulting my notes, but I want to get this right. It's rolling out slowly but surely, but it's going to be a while before everyone can get it. So EE, Vodafone, O2, BT Mobile, they all launched last year. Sky Mobile was in January this year, and 3 was in February. And they vary from one network to the other. EE is in around 80 towns last time I looked. I'm sure somebody will ring me later and say, no, it's more than that now, but that's the last release I remember seeing. And then I think Sky, BT and Sky were in about 20. So if you're living in one of the UK's major cities, London, Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool, you'll be able to get 5G, and you'll be able to choose from about a dozen handsets on which to get it. And the two that I looked at most recently were claiming to offer 5G tariffs for the same price as a 4G tariff, because they don't feel that you should pay more for a better service.
But importantly, you need a new handset. Anyone listening to this, you're not going to be able to use 5G on your existing handset.
No, absolutely. A report from a firm called Omdia, they're an analyst firm, they recently ranked the UK as 7th out of the 22 leading 5G countries. So first was South Korea, then Switzerland of all places, Kuwait in the USA, China in 6th. And this is based on things like total spectrum available, number of operators offering services, network coverage, and take up of those services. The promise of 5G is more bandwidth, so faster download. So they talk about download speeds of over a gigabit per second, though the fastest I've heard of in London was about half of that, 550 megabits per second. It's still light years ahead of 4G, which is typically 8 to 10 megabits a second, or up to 40 on a good day. And a magazine called Tech Radar put the 5G networks to a test in London over the summer, and the top speed they managed was at 550 megabits per second that I mentioned, in which they managed to download a 1 gigabyte high quality movie from Amazon Prime in 43 seconds. Wow. So, but there is another side to 5G, and that's the whole, Internet of Things, smart cities, driverless cars. You've got all these things now, whether it's a pipeline carrying oil, or whether it's a refrigerated lorry carrying chilled goods that are fitted with sensors that are constantly polling back to base saying, yeah, I'm okay, I'm still at -4 degrees C, or whatever I should be, or I haven't got any holes in me, there's no leakage. And then the minute there is an issue, HQ can see it and can do something about it. And these things need, reliable, stable networks. So 5G can be a big part of that. And I think you'll see certain enterprises, huge companies will deploy their own 5G networks just for more efficient communications on their, campus, head office, whatever. So Vodafone have just launched a 5G network at Coventry University. That was just last month. And the uni is going to use that for sort of state-of-the-art virtual reality learning technologies. When we talked about virtual reality earlier, that's one point I meant to make, actually, that it may not be flying in consumer terms, but it is very useful for allowing things like trainee doctors to do an operation without actually having to physically cut somebody open, and various other things as well.
Yeah.
And just finally, on the driverless car side of things, again, if cars are going to be able to, work their way around our streets without crashing into each other, they're going to need good quality, high bandwidth networks to enable them to do their thing. And O2 have just launched the first commercial lab for 5G and satellite comms. It's part of Project Darwin, which is a 4-year trial program based at the Harwell Science and Innovation Campus in Oxfordshire. And it's open to companies looking to explore next generation connectivity solutions and for connected and autonomous vehicles. So there's 2 cars up there, 2 Renault Twizy electric cars that O2's converted into autonomous, and they've fitted them with sensors to allow them to be controlled from the lab and driven around the Harwell campus, so that companies that want to do things with driverless cars can actually, put them to the test.
So do you think we should be embracing 5G, David?
Oh, that's a good question. I think yes, but from a consumer point of view, people will only embrace it if it's affordable for them. It could be that there's 2. I think all these things. 4G was a shiny new thing a few years back, and before that it was 3G. And naturally, over time, they just evolved to become the new normal. And as more handsets get bought, more handsets get made. I'm sure we're all on 4G handsets now. In the early days, people go, "Well, I'm not buying a new handset. I don't need one." But people tend to be on 24-month contracts, so in 2 years' time, they can probably get a 5G handset, for exactly the same tariff as their 4G one now. So I don't think it's necessarily a thing of will people choose to embrace it. It's just a natural evolution of how things go. And in the commercial side of things, as I say, I think there's going to be enough benefits to it for things like large enterprises having their own networks and for all the stuff that's going on with the autonomous vehicles.
Listen, this has been an amazing chat, and there's so much in this. I think this is going to be one of these shows that we call and replay about 2 or 3 times just to hear it all. But before we let you go, one final question. A lot of people that listen to our show here are particularly small businesses, and they're bringing mobile into their customer acquisition strategy and their engagement strategy. And is there one message or 2 messages which is sort of say to them, look, this is my advice to you?
Well, I think you can be glass half empty and say, well, if you haven't got on this particular mobile train, then you've left it a bit late. You should have done it years ago. But the other way of looking at it is it's never too late to start. There are plenty of other companies in the same boat. And I guess there does tend to be this obsession with apps when you're talking about mobile. So a lot of people are thinking, well, look, let's go back to our example of the independent grocer around the corner from me on the high street. What do I need an app for? I'm not going to sell through it. It's going to be expensive. Even a fairly sort of paint by numbers app is going to cost me a few £1,000s to get done. What good's it going to do me? And for companies of that sort of size, I'd say forget about apps. Don't think mobile's all about apps. It's actually quite easy to put a sign up in your shop and say, look, we'd like to communicate with you. If we can have your mobile number, you can join our Office Club. And then you start building the database of your customers' mobile numbers. And every week you can, if say you're a restaurant and you're a bit quiet, you can text 100 people and say, first 20 people down here tonight, we'll give you a free bottle of wine or whatever it is. And a lot of big brands use SMS, and it tends to get overlooked in all the shiny new stuff, the apps and the over-the-top messaging like WhatsApp and that sort of stuff. But it can be really, really useful to a small business. And if you think, well, how do I make this work? There are quite a few companies out there. I can recommend one called Text Local. So TEXT Local, just as an example. Other alternatives are available, and they're not paying me to plug them, but it's just one I happen to know. And it's very easy to go on their platform and buy a bundle of messages. You know, it might be 1,000 to last you a month or whatever it is, and then to automate messages to go out to this database that you built. And obviously, SMS, it doesn't have the bells and whistles of an app, but it's been around forever. And I think I can't remember the percentage, but we all open the messages we get on our phone, you know, especially if it's one that you've opted into, within seconds of them arriving usually. And because you've asked people's permission to take their mobile number and use it to communicate with them, it's all perfectly GDPR compliant, perfectly above board, and quite a quick way into mobile for a lot of companies.
There are still more, I believe, more text messages sent today, despite all the new technologies, sent and received every day than there are people on the planet.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
it's because so much of it happens in the background. You know, I think M&S, Marks and Spencer, one of the first big retailers in the UK to really build a good opted-in mobile database of like 1 or 2 million people and use that regularly. And, you know, you look at their target market, you wouldn't necessarily say that it was a sweet spot for engaging on mobile, but they did very well with that stuff for a few years.
But also, not everyone will have a smartphone still. So, you know, text messages will still work very well on those other phones.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, listen, mate, it's really, really good. And I'm really delighted you've taken the time out for us today. And we really appreciate that.
It was a pleasure to be asked.
Really, really good.
Talking about mobile is never a chore. It's always good fun, especially with two such lovely people.
Well, we can tell it's a passion of yours, that's for sure. As it is
mine. I'm going to get back to my penthouse now, Mark. I'll be right in a minute.
I can see my flat behind you, actually. I can. Anyway, thank you, David. It's been really good. And we'll get you back next year when we see where we are in another year's time, because I would imagine mobile is the one thing which, you know, Murphy's Law doubles and doubles so quickly that, you know, it's just exponential, the change.
Be a pleasure. Thanks, guys. See you again. Have a good day.
Cheers now. Bye now.
Take care.
So Pen, a great guest again. Wow, really good.
I don't know if you noticed, I've been writing a lot of notes.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but really good.
Yeah, really interesting. And that's what I love about doing this show. I think we have some great interviews, and I'm learning all the time. So hopefully all the people that are watching or listening.
So anyone watching or listening and they want to get in touch with us, how can they do that?
Well, we are on Twitter at the UK Brand Show, and we're also on Facebook, same at the UK Brand Show. We've also got a website where you can listen again to a lot of the content that we've got, which is the ukbrandshow.co.uk, and we're on YouTube as well.
Of course. And if anybody wants to be a part of the show in any way, then email me, mark@theukbrandshow.co.uk. That's it, I think. I mean, what a show. I'm definitely going to straight away download the show, and before we put it live, I'm going to listen to myself again, because there's so much in that. I mean,
I've made notes that I'm going to go and do a couple of things actually. So
and go and have a play with your new mobile.
Yes, indeed.
And I'll see you very soon. We'll have another great guest soon, and more of that detail later.
Indeed. Thanks, Mark. Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye for now.